as we dive deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today, interviewing top technology leaders from around the world and sharing true cybercrime stories to raise awareness. From the creators of Vigilance, the newest global technology newsletter translating cyber news into business language we all understand. So please help us keep this going by subscribing for free to our YouTube channel and downloading our podcast episodes on Apple and Spotify so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and now the show. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies podcast. I'm your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today is the always positive, interesting, Kentucky-based Mark Mosher. How are you, Mark?
I'm great after that intro. Thank you, David.
I can
follow me into my meeting after this to introduce me.
I can do that. I can do that. I write that out. Yeah, there's just a small fee.
Between that and a little theme music, I think I'll be good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really excited about today. Look, we're going to talk about what employers want in cybersecurity, kind of some of the new approaches to advance your career in cybersecurity, to break into the field, and kind of how to have the best business communications. We've got an expert, Samantha Buckenmaier, goes by Sam. Sam, welcome to the studio. We're really happy to have you here.
Very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So tell us about yourself, and then let's get to the organization that you're with, Stanton House, which is a remarkable recruiting and placement firm based in the UK. So walk us through your story first, into kind of your progression and how you landed in cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I'm an Army brat. I grew up in various places, but I always say I lived the longest in Maryland. So originally from the East Coast, moved out to Chicago after my undergrad 4 years ago at this point.
Outstanding city.
Yep, love it. It's a little cold, but I do love it. I actually started out in Rockford, which is about an hour and a half, couple hours northeast of Chicago. I was doing an AmeriCorps placement, so I was working very closely with food insecurity on a collegiate level and putting in programming for the college. But I ended up moving to Chicago when I got the job at Stanton House. Didn't know anything about cybersecurity when I started. I knew not to click on links, but that's about all I knew. And it was an interesting entrance into the field because obviously I'm not in the field of cybersecurity. I'm kind of on the outside of it, but learned a lot, and it is a fascinating field. I know way more than I ever thought I would know about threats in the field or about the jobs in the field.
So let me break down what you just said a little bit. So what I found interesting, and Mark, you chime in anytime, but what I found is I didn't know much about cybersecurity, but I knew not to click on links, which I love, because whenever somebody doesn't know what we do, it's like, I don't know, I keep you guys out of the news. Right? Like we teach you not to click on links. It's like, oh, well, everybody knows that. I'm like, if they know it, why is 80% of all the breaches caused by us still doing it? Right? Like it's like a social experiment. And I agree with you. I think cybersecurity is a remarkable field. It has to do with, you mentioned that you were raised by parents in the military. Like there's a direct alignment to that, isn't it? Because it's about a bigger cause than just ourselves, just our own financial needs, our own personal goals. It's about protecting others. There's a bigger mission behind it. Would you agree with that?
I would completely agree with that. And I think that's where I get quite a bit of my fulfillment in this job, is obviously the people that I'm facing are not only experts in their field, and I'm helping them move up in their world, because work is such a huge part of what we do in our day-to-day lives. But at the end of the day, we're also helping protect the company, which is a really cool place to be. But backtracking a little bit about Stanton House. So you are completely right. We are a UK headquartered company. We opened up our Chicago office 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago at this point. And that's when kind of we realized that we wanted to do cybersecurity and wanted to focus on cybersecurity and really wanted to be niche and become strong experts in the field versus cybersecurity and IT, and having a bigger breadth. Being able to be focused and be more so consultative in our roles has really made us stand out from the other recruiting companies. We have a couple different areas in which we recruit for. We have a team that recruits for sales folks into cyber vendors. We have an engineering team, and they recruit mainly into cyber vendors as well. Everything from lower end all the way up to CTOs. And then my team where I sit is technical cybersecurity. So I work with leadership and C-level execs, but we also have a team that places with analysts, architects, and engineers, and we help them out of companies in terms of their security program across the whole of the United States, with a little bit of work up in Canada as well.
Oh, that's phenomenal. So you are placing them in key organizations or at providers for those key organizations? Meaning, like, Mark and I work for a North American MSSP. It's huge, right? It's owned by Konica Minolta. But if we're looking for cybersecurity analysts for our SOC or for pen testers, certified ethical hackers, things like that, you guys could be the people that we could come to.
Exactly. Yep. So we, like I said, a couple of my other teams focus only on cyber vendors. Our team doesn't. We focus everything from startups all the way up to Fortune 500, because cybersecurity.
The clients that we serve. Yeah, the clients that we serve. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's the clients that we serve when they want to employ their own pen tester, SOC analyst, architect, things like that.
Exactly, and that's exactly
Very
right.
cool.
I always think of it as almost like a sliding scale where you have the company, you have us as the middleman, and then you have the candidate, and then we just make the perfect match.
That's great. That's great. Mark did some OSINT, which is fancy form for like open source intelligence. And he said he came across your blog or something about your philosophy, your leadership, your webpage. So Mark, tell us about what you found, and then Sam, please share with us kind of like the vision that you have and aspects that could help the listeners.
The first thing I really liked about it when I came across that was the quote by John Quincy Adams. I thought that was I had not heard that in a long time, and it reminded me of really what it takes. It was real good. So it says, if your actions inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. I thought that was just really cool. It'd been a long time since I had heard that. I did want to ask.
And I thought Simon Sinek came up with all of them. Right? I attribute everything to that guy. I give that guy credit for everything, and I'm like, Abraham Lincoln said this. Sorry,
we're fine. No, I did find one thing really interesting when it came to your philosophy on leadership, and I think this is really important, really across the board, not in just cybersecurity, but really in life. One of your first thoughts was, what attribute is the best effective for a good leader? And you listed listening is that top effective trait. I just wanted to see if you could maybe just expand a little bit on that for the listeners.
Yeah, no, of course. So I'm early on in my own leadership journey. I'm definitely stepping up more in terms of my own leadership. I'm learning a lot from kind of my boss and my team. And I always tell folks, because I sit in with a lot of C-levels, and I prompt them quite a bit and do quite a bit of training on their leadership philosophy. So I've picked up quite a bit. And I always say, you're never at the top of the leadership mountain. You've never made it. You never can say, I'm there. It's always a constant development of self. And I think that's why it is difficult, honestly, to be an effective leader, because it takes a lot of looking in the mirror and self-reflecting, which isn't the easiest thing to do.
Because they're afraid that it's going to show weakness, and they are afraid, I think leaders in general, and this is a good discussion. So if you don't mind us going down the segue, I think it's helpful for people. because I think that that's wrong, right? I think a leader that shows some self-deprecation and some humanity builds their credibility to us.
And I wouldn't necessarily call it self-deprecation. I think I would call it strong self-awareness and vulnerability. And I think that
excellent. Yeah. I would agree. And you can lead from any role too. There are leadership, and I think that's where I do know Simon Sinek said, because I saw him say it. But it's really, really important, because so many people think, well, I have all these really good ideas, but I'm not in that title, so I just better keep quiet. And it's like, I'm telling you, as an older person in leadership at a large company, please speak up. Like Gen Z, millennial groups, like, you have no idea how a fresh idea and a fresh question, it changes the trajectory. And whether they'll tell you that it has or not, it has to do with their own character and their own leadership. We do a pretty good job of giving the people credit that came up with the ideas. Most of my good ideas, Mark can tell you, most of my good ideas I've had for our company have all come from younger people that aren't in leadership titles, but they had great ideas. They saw it with a good, clear lens, and we were kind of dogged in our ways of doing things, just out of years of being in the trenches. So it's really key. And I think listening is absolutely critical.
And I completely agree with you on that. I think I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about their own specific leadership philosophy, and one of the things they said was the ability to facilitate great ideas from the individuals that you work with. And what he meant by that was a lot of younger analysts or engineers or people starting just out in their career have a heavy set imposter syndrome, where, maybe their idea they think has already been done. And so being able as a leader to not only listen, but also asking the right prompting questions to create the environment of, it's okay to share ideas. Your ideas are valid. And how do you create that empathetic environment to have that success from those individuals moving up in their workplace? So a lot of it does come from listening. If you are only hearing the sound of your own voice in a meeting, that's probably not the best meeting that you can conduct.
I like that. No, that's exactly right. Exactly
so it's I'm sure my parents always told me, the more mouth closed and ears open, the better off you'll be. So that's kind of a philosophy that I try to live by. I'm not always successful in it, but it's always something that I strive for, because being able to, like I said, create just that environment of vulnerability, and just people want to be heard at the end of the day. And if you can do that, then that's just going to create trust, and it has all benefits from there.
Right. That is a life goal of mine, to be able to listen more. And you can ask my wife, Kim. Mark knows my wife, Kim, and Lord knows I need to remember that I have one mouth and two ears. So,
the only way we can make David talk less is if we tied his hands behind his back.
Absolutely, because it's the Italian thing that just keeps going. So I do want to touch on imposter syndrome. Yeah. Before we get to, I want to hear about the cybersecurity field, give some people some valuable insight. But before we do that, let's just touch real quick on imposter syndrome. It's not just in cybersecurity, right? But especially cybersecurity, imposter syndrome is so rampant, because everybody feels I don't know it all. I shouldn't be able to speak up. I've only seen this aspect of it. But it's so important for people to kind of overcome that, and to realize that you're in that role because people will value your opinion, right? And you do have value, and it's so important. I mean, it's in a lot of fields. There's a lot of attorneys. My background was in law. When I was younger, I came out as a young attorney, and I really struggled with imposter syndrome, because I could not believe at 25 these CEOs of these major corporations were listening to my opinion on what to do. I was I have you know what I mean? I haven't done anything yet, but yet they really needed it. right? But the truth is the guidance that we gave and stuff saved them from lawsuits, antitrust claims, like all that stuff. So we had the value, we just didn't recognize it in ourselves. I do think that law school and the legal profession, same thing with medical, does more for the ego and the self-confidence of younger people than the cybersecurity field. I think that's something that our field needs to really build up, right? And really help young people that are coming out and entering realize the absolute critical value you have to our country, the country that you serve, the brands that you serve. You have such an important role. Don't underestimate that. Like imposter syndrome needs to go away, right? And it's, if there was a pill for it, I would design it and sell it. Like that would just be, it would be such a good thing for people to kind of overcome, because people come out of law school and they have like very little, skill set yet. Their advice that they'll give will still be very valuable, but they have huge confidence, right? Same thing with like physicians, right? Like they are really, really confident because like the schooling kind of embraces, like it builds it up in you, right? But in cybersecurity, I mean, some of the programs do, but some of them are more because it's so binary, right? It's either you're right or you're wrong. And if you fail this test, you do this. But a lot of organizations like Try Hack Me and some of these things that really give people a lot of good sense of, I'm in the top 1% of Try Hack Me. It helps them build their confidence. So when they get that role, they can feel confident and not struggle with imposter syndrome. But nobody's going to know everything in cybersecurity.
Nobody's going to know everything. No. And I will say, in terms of the confidence thing, because obviously I think there's such thing as too much confidence. And I think going into a profession with, especially medical, oh God, I would hate if my doctor was like, I know everything's fine. And he's a year out of med school. I'd be like, okay, we got to slow down. Yeah. And I think it is the same with cybersecurity, because there is a lot of pressure on those individuals to protect the company, because all eyes are on them, obviously, when something does happen. I feel like, I struggled with imposter syndrome quite a bit, because I'm relatively newer into my career. I've excelled quite a bit in it, though. I was second biller last year. I headed up women in business last year. I was the 5th hire overall in the U.S. and has helped grow it out to where we are about 21 right now.
All the reasons not to have imposter syndrome, right?
Exactly.
Like all the reasons why you should.
So it's what I've done, I think, is there is such a power in accepting that I don't have to have all the answers. I think before I didn't really want to admit that I didn't know everything. That was hard for me. And then when I kind of sat back for a second and gave myself permission, so to speak, of you don't know everything, and that is actually a beautiful thing, because there's a long life ahead of me, and there's a long life ahead of a lot of individuals early in their career. So how boring would it be if we just stopped learning and if we did know everything at that point? So The imposter syndrome to me now isn't necessarily that I can't. It's more so that I've accepted that I don't know everything and I get to learn more. And with each little bit that I continue to learn, a little bit of my imposter syndrome continues to go away. Will it ever go away? Not completely sure. I would like to say so, but I also think it's become a very powerful motivator for me in my career.
Absolutely. So let's
because we have a lot of listeners and a lot of viewers that are trying to get in or break into cybersecurity, and they're always asking, how do I do that? How do I get in? What certs should I have? So if I were trying to just get into cybersecurity, which if you saw my skill set and my knowledge base, you would think I was just getting into cybersecurity. What do you have any advice? Is there maybe certain certifications? What's that look like if somebody's just trying to get in? What would you tell them?
Yeah, and that is something that I think the cybersecurity field is lacking at the moment, where I feel like we're very mid and top heavy, and that's why a lot of individuals are having trouble even breaking into it. I think it starts quite a bit with education. So for instance, and what I mean by that is education surrounding the field, not necessarily what your undergrad degree is. So a lot of individuals sometimes don't really know about cybersecurity as a field of something that they can go into until they're a little bit later, they've done something else, which is completely fine. But I do think that it needs to start a bit younger and build up that way versus, you go down a certain career path and then you have to pivot quite a bit. That being said, though, there's a couple ways that I would suggest trying to get into cybersecurity. First step is, honestly, help desk is never a bad start. Yes, it's more IT. Yes, it's more geared towards that end, but it is a good way to get your foot in the door because you'll get exposure to some security from that. And I'm talking, this is very kind of first, second job.
Right. But it's a great way of starting.
It's a great way to start. We have a lot of individuals come from the IT background, and that's even what we are requested to find, especially in application security with how much liaising there is with dev teams. They request an IT background. So I would also suggest if you are a little bit later in your career and you were looking to pivot or get into cybersecurity, get that first step, certs are great. That being said, though, certs have never made or broke a process. I haven't had hiring managers request certs very often, aside from maybe some AWS cloud specialty security certs, or a CISSP if you're a bit more in leadership. What I will say is boot camps are not a bad thing. Boot camps can be expensive. And I always suggest that a boot camp is a good foot in the door if their alumni network is strong. So a good reason to do a boot camp is looking at people who graduated, looking at the job placement statistics, figuring out if there is even an alum network for it, because the boot camp is the boot camp. Yes, you'll learn, but
after the boot camp.
After the boot camp.
After the boot camp, what does it do for you? What is the name recognition? What are the connections that you've made, the people that you've met, the leaders that taught you? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Do all boot camps have to be in person, or can they be online, hybrid?
No, I mean, there are some that are online. It's really depending on what you can do. Some people don't have the ability to be on site, depending on what it is. It's also what you prefer. Like if you're not willing to really go on site for a boot camp, that's fine. Do I think maybe you could get a little bit more out of it if you're on site? Maybe, but then we're back to the whole argument of, do we need to work to be in the office and stuff like that. It's almost that same argument of really, how do you learn best? And some people very much learn best in a quiet space with their, just them without the distraction. So, you just pick the one that's best for you, but with the caveat that they have a strong job placement post-grad.
Yeah, excellent. I would agree. I did the Security Plus boot camp and did it virtually. And really the only reason that it was kind of impactful for me as opposed to being in person was everyone on screen. And then we did all our labs together as a group. So that was really, there was kind of a bonding and a co-authoring of final results. And, that kind of helped. So I would encourage you, if you can do it virtual, if you can do it in person, as you said, Sam, however you learn best, right?
Exactly. The last piece that I do want to mention is having a mentor and finding a mentor in the field. So if cybersecurity is your passion, cybersecurity is your goal, you're struggling with finding a plan on getting there, a mentor is an amazing resource. And there are so many senior levels or not even, mid-levels that are more than happy to be that person for you. It doesn't even have to be somebody that in your network right off the bat. It is somebody that, you can have an introductory call with, figure out if you match, because obviously that's a big part of it. And then it's always the other side of the table is very flattering to be asked to be a mentor. So absolutely. I always say nobody's going to get mad at you for asking for some mentorship.
Exactly.
No, I think that's really important too. And then they can even help you if you don't know which niche in cybersecurity you want to land in. Do you want to land in the red team because it's cool and it's more, you get to break things, you get to hack into things, or if you want to be more blue team and be more in like the leadership, management, monitoring the SOC whole hierarchy, things like that, or you want to have an element in the sales consulting aspect. Once you kind of identify that, it'll help you kind of search for a good mentor within that sector.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some of the like high demand roles that you're seeing? Are you seeing more red team, more blue team, more consulting aspects? What is kind of trending right now that's coming across your desk and your teams?
Yeah, so we always see quite a bit of CloudSec, AppSec, and detection and response. Those are like the three main roles that we get. I'm not quite
sure. I don't know what happened either, but we're back, everybody. Sorry.
Anyway, so I was saying, so
CloudSec, we're going over.
Yep. So I will say, I think application security is still probably one of the most prominent. I'm seeing a couple things. So application and product security sometimes are interchangeable. I'm seeing more so surrounding product security strategy. So with a SaaS company typically that has a product security strategy of how are we going to, almost like a marketing tactic of how are we going to sell security strategy to our clients, and then AppSec being obviously the security of the application.
So these are company, can I ask? Yeah. So these are companies that have a security product or service packaged with it, and they want people to have tested it so that they can show the veracity of and the security levels of their offering.
Correct. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Makes sense.
So we're seeing a bit of an influx in that. Cloud security, I think, is always going to continue to be in demand. I mean, we're only going to get increased exposure into the cloud, and companies that are still on-prem are continually falling behind the curve. So that is definitely going to continue to be a necessity in the field. And then detection response, same. Like that is kind of an obvious one where you need protection from the company. You need to be able to deal with any sort of breaches, and you need to have forward-thinking minds surrounding what's going on in the field in terms of threats. Couple things that I think.
So that's more I'm sorry if I can ask, is that more the SOC analysts, the people that are managing a SIM tool, things like that?
Yeah, all of that. Red
threat
teaming,
hunters.
all of that. A couple positions that I think are going, one we've seen quite a bit more is GRC individuals, so compliance individuals in the security realm.
Yeah, I always wonder about that, because that's a great way for people to break into the field that aren't technical by nature, right?
Yes,
but they understand
exactly. And that's a great way to join security without having to be hands on keyboard.
Right.
One thing that we're being asked more of to find in our GRC analysts or compliance managers is FedRAMP compliance. So that's a lot of dealing with government companies, compliance within government companies. And I think the reason for that being is obviously the Biden administration is doing quite a bit of work around cybersecurity and making sure companies that are working within the government are compliant. And so anybody that has government contracts need to understand FedRAMP. And so we're being asked to find that quite a bit more. And that's a slightly rarer skill set, but I think more individuals are having that skill set as it becomes more popular. The last one that I would say, and this is just me pretending I have a crystal ball, but obviously there's been a lot of conversation surrounding AI and ChatGPT.
Yep.
And how it's going to change the world. And I'm a big believer in that. I don't think we're there yet, but I will say...
It's got Google nervous.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it...
I love it. I'm asking ChatGPT things like all day. I have conversations with it.
When you think about it, right, you can ask it almost the same things you're asking Google, but rather than getting and filtering through all these indexed different sites, right, and then ads and all the stuff that might skew you a certain way, it actually kind of like pulls all that together and just in plain language will answer your question. Yeah. Pretty powerful stuff.
It is very powerful. It's crazy. I think someone told me that every search is like, every question to ask ChatGPT is like 3 cents cost in data power or something like that. Ridiculous. So it's not cheap for sure. But I do think it's already being used in cybersecurity. I think it's only going to increase the effectiveness of using AI in cybersecurity. And I think there's going to be a skill gap in individuals with AI experience and automation experience. So I think that is something that we're going to be asked more of as time goes on, is to find individuals that have specific AI, security experience. But that is just my prediction. We'll see.
No, I would think that I think that would all follow suit, right? There'll be some certification along the way that gets created. There will be some standards on how to address, because when you look at the standards that are out there that people try and comply with, that organizations try and comply with, there's not really an element necessarily to specific AI platforms or AI compliance, right? And so how do we address that? Because the threat actors, the black hats, are definitely leveraging it already to improve social engineering, but also to create polymorphic code and some other things. So it's definitely going to have a very big significance. That's probably a very good forecast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's really good. So let's talk about the hiring process. How does somebody stand out in the hiring process? So, I mean, of course, it's going to matter about the role that they're looking at. But I know that in our speaking to a lot of people that have served as mentors of others, they seem to be big proponents of a home lab, things that they can demonstrate for people. What are you seeing?
Yep. So I'll say, and this goes across the board, honestly, I'm not going to say it's for one specific role, but whenever I'm giving interview tips or interview help with individuals that I work with, a lot of it is surrounding less so, flexing your technical muscles. Obviously, there's a time and place for that during the technical interview, but I always talk about humanization. And what I mean by that is we're already losing a bit of the human aspect just being over camera. These people are doing a lot of virtual interviews. It can get a little tiring for the hiring manager. So a lot of it is just going to be learning how to humanize yourself and make a human connection. So what I typically recommend is, especially on your elevator pitch, is making sure that your passion for the field comes through. I typically recommend ending your elevator pitch on your why. So why are you doing what you're doing? Why have you made X your career? What about it gets you out of bed in the morning, basically? And it just shows a little bit of who you are, your passion for the certain field, and helps make you stand out.
And I think it's really important what you just mentioned about having an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that have gone through the process that haven't even prepared one for themselves. And I think that's really important no matter what you're doing. Like in sales and consulting, they're very familiar with elevator pitches because they have to succinctly, your company can do 137 different offerings. How do you succinctly start that out? How do you boil that down when you meet somebody at a networking event or in a first meeting and they say, so what do you guys do? How do you boil that down to a sentence or two? And I think there's a great deal of sophistication that comes with that succinctness.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And it is not second nature also to talk about your achievements. I think for a lot of individuals, it can be hard to gloat, so to speak, about what you've done. And I always say that is an interview is not the time to be bashful. Like, that is the time to really, really express what you've done in a succinct way, for sure. And what I typically recommend in terms of formulating an elevator pitch is look at your resume, look at what you've done, and then what are the top 3 things that you've done at each company that have shaped the company. Because whether it's small, whether it's larger, you have had an impact in some way, shape, or form for that place. So talk about it. And then
you helped create a policy. You helped you helped solve a problem for them.
Whatever it is, exactly. Yeah. And then you can pick one or two things from each, and then there's your elevator pitch. All you do, you're just talking about it. What you don't want to do is go through your career history by naming your job titles. That's something that can be seen on a resume. So what can you do to stand out of, this is where I was when the company started, look how much better it was when I left. And that was because of these 3 effects that I had and the impact that I made. And that can be a very powerful soft sell of yourself.
So letting their
point that, maybe a lot of people overlook, especially when it comes, to the IT world, not always the biggest conversationalist or the loudest voice in the room. But I think that you make a really good point, Sam, that, this is the time to not be bashful. It's okay to pat yourself on the back and tell somebody why you're good. I mean, historically in my career, I guess I've achieved that because I enjoy talking about myself, but for others, it may prove to be challenging, but you do it. I think you make a really good point. I hope the listeners took note of that.
Yeah, I would feel that having a time to, I mean, you don't want to come across as arrogant, for sure. You don't want to come across as patronizing or arrogant or anything like that. So you have to be careful. But I think that demonstrating or like just painting a picture, like letting your personality come through and show, look, I saw this issue and I did this and I was able to solve it for somebody. And they really found it helpful. I think that's a great way of saying it, right? It's a great way of sharing it, right? Or if there was some emotional component that you were able to solve, paint the picture with words for the interviewer, because they'll see a lot of different people for a lot of different roles, right? And so you want to really make yourself memorable.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And there is certainly a difference between talking about yourself in like you said, letting the words speak for themselves versus actively selling everything that you're saying about how amazing you are. And that can be where ego can come in and detract from memorability and make you memorable in a slightly more negative way than you would like.
Right.
Well, yeah, because what we're not, and I wasn't trying to imply, Mark, that you come across that way, because you don't. But because but I think it's important, like as a recruiter or as the interviewer, you're trying to find, does this person fit in, and what impact can they make at this organization? And by sharing and being confident in just sharing ways that you've impacted other organizations, then they could say, oh, that reminds me of this organization. They could do the same thing here, or they could do something similar here. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what tips do you have in the interview process, like the interview questions? I will say there's a ton of great resources that are no cost. Some might have a small cost, but there's a lot of no cost ways you can find out, top interview questions that certain organizations have for certain roles. So just spend the time researching that so that you have an idea.
Glassdoor, great resource.
Yep. Glassdoor.
Comments with a grain of salt, but Glassdoor typically will have some good interview questions already posted from the companies, especially if they're bigger companies. So that's a good resource.
Yep. ChatGPT is up there too, because ChatGPT will tell you, you can even prompt ChatGPT and say, you are a hiring manager for this company today. Like, what would you ask me? And they'll come up with some of it is very generic, but depending on how you can play with it a little bit and get some really kind of unique insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
ChatGPT can go a little deep.
Yeah, it can. So as what other advice do you have for people kind of looking to kind of advance in either break in or advance up within security? How about if they get an offer? How do they go about negotiating that offer? Are the offers usually kind of take it or leave it and you just kind of take it? What
about it sometimes? If they know, that is a very strong source to utilize, because that external recruiter can help negotiate on behalf, because they'll know the hiring manager. But beside the point,
so let me interrupt you for just a quick second. So external recruiters can actually serve as your liaison and almost as your advocate, right? So that is really important, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are working with an external recruiter, talk to them, because it's nice because they're not working on behalf of a company. It's very much, like I said, the middleman. So it's always our candidate. So that's always what we're trying to do, because our fee and how we get paid obviously comes from our candidates' base salary paid by the company. So that's why it's in our best interest as well as the candidates to get the highest offer for them. If you are negotiating on behalf of yourself, though, I always see it as it is a conversation. So you should have a target in your head. You find that target by figuring out what the market rate is, by talking to recruiters, A, B, talking to peers around you that have similar jobs and having very open conversation about salary, just to see where the market is, because that can be kind of hard. There are salary guides out there to look at, so you have the resources. It's just compiling it together. And then once you have an offer in hand, it is very rare that if you negotiate on an offer, they're going to revoke the offer. And I think there's a little bit of a fear behind that for some candidates, in terms of, if I say, like, I want $5K more, they're just going to take it away. And I think that is a bit of a misconception. And if the company does that, it's probably not a company that you want to be working for anyway.
Right, it's probably a sign of the culture there that you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You're probably dodging a bullet by
exactly.
Anyway. Yeah.
So if there is something that isn't sitting well with you in the contract, there's a couple of things that you can do. I always suggest negotiating over phone and then following up with an email as well, just so it's documented somewhere. But
absolutely, because it's just about expectations, right? Like, some of it isn't necessarily intentional, but your impression, oh, we talked about this, I'm getting this amount of PTO, or I'm getting this, but they didn't say that, they meant this. Just confirming it, exactly. And just be very firm but polite. Just be like, just want to confirm. Thanks for the time. Just want to confirm, as I understood, here's what I understand. Exactly. If there's any edits, please just let me know. Looking forward to hearing back from you, whatever, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And the reason why I say it with a phone as well is because some context can get lost in an email, where it can come across, depending on how the person's reading it, in maybe an arrogant or negative way. So hopping on a phone call with HR or whoever the hiring manager is to talk about comp, talk about PTO, and then, like you said, following up with that email, I think that's the best way to negotiate. But my biggest thing is never be scared to have a conversation. Because the worst at the end of the day that someone can say is, that's not in the budget, unfortunately, we can't do that. And then that's where the conversation turns into, okay, well, what does it look like, a year down the road? If this is really where I want to reach, how is that going to work between us? Because it's an agreement for both you and the company. It's not 100% for the company and then none for you. It should very much be 50-50, an agreement between partners.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what about if they are balancing between a couple different companies, right? And even more so, what happens if people? I guess I have two questions, if you don't mind, before we wrap up. What about the people that are getting frustrated? In the security community on LinkedIn, I see a lot of. We try and help. We throw up, remote jobs that we see, jobs that don't need 4-year degrees. Like, here's a bunch that we found in as we're posting jobs for our own company. We came across all of these. Here, guys, go. Just share, and people really like that stuff. But then there's always the one or two people that will comment and say, yeah, but I've been looking for 6 months and it's just not working, or whatever.
Interview fatigue.
Yeah, interview fatigue, right? Because it's heartbreaking when you really can picture yourself at a company, with a team, and then for whatever reason it falls through. What do we do to help them? What are you seeing? What do you guys do?
Yep. So I always strip it back. If someone's been telling me they've been job searching for 6 to 8 months, or even longer than that sometimes, there is probably something missing, and we just need to figure out what that is. So first thing obviously we'll do is review a resume. We'll make sure the resume is concise, it's up to date, it makes sense. Sometimes that's honestly the issue, is that they're just getting passed over because their resume is either doesn't have the right information or has too much of the wrong information. So it's a little bit of both. And then we'll also go through some interview activities, those kind of smaller things, just to make sure that it's not those basic activities. And then from there, if all those things check out, I'll start prompting into what is your job search strategy, because you would be surprised that a lot of these folks, it's very much kind of like a spray and pray, so to speak, where individuals are just easy applying to everything they see. And that is not the most effective way to job search. I always say a job search is two sides. And I use the analogy of a spider web. Basically, you're creating a job search spider web, where on one side you do have the active applications that need to be tailored. You need to take the time to tailor your resume to that job search, to that job board, submit your resume, figure out who the hiring manager is, email the hiring manager so your name has a little bit of name recognition in terms of going through a pile of resumes, and doing the due diligence that way. While on the other side of the job search is active networking. Have a conversation with them, see how they got there, see what advice that they have for you. And then that all creates that spider web that I was talking about to eventually, the risk of staying with the analogy, catch a job. So
that's really good. That's actually something that, I don't think a lot of people recognize that. Is there are there some leading software programs that people use that scan resumes? Do resumes have to have certain keywords in it? What can you share?
Yeah, so there are ATS systems like Greenhouse or Workday, things like that, and they do scan resumes for certain buzzwords. The issue with that, though, is you never quite know what the buzzwords are, so it's hard to figure out what they need. So
it's very little you can do other than seeing some key terms of art in the job description itself.
And putting it in your resume, correct? And that's what I mean by making a tailored resume. But with those applications, it can be easy just to submit an application and then wait. You are your own advocate at the end of the day. So that's why it is so important to figure out who the hiring manager is. It's very easy with today's technology and LinkedIn just to find who the hiring manager is and reaching out to them, telling them that they applied. Even if they're not responding, they're going to most likely see your name as somebody that messaged you on LinkedIn, because they pop up all the time. And being able to go through a pile of resumes and be like, wait, I recognize that name for some reason. Right. And then that's going to cause a pause. That's going to cause a look. And then that's just going to up your chances. Whether or not they decide to move you forward, it's who really knows, but it's still a good active, practice in being yourself advocate. That's excellent. Well, hey, Sam Buckenmaier, thank you so much. You've showed us a lot of different tips and suggestions. We got a lot out of it. Mark, don't you go anywhere and start taking these tips. Typing up my resume as he's like updating it. I'm looking on Indeed, man. If I see your resume, you're in trouble. Yeah. No, this was really helpful, and I know that the listeners and watchers are going to get a lot out of this. Yeah, so before we take off, any parting words on what's new or next for Stanton House, for yourself? Yeah, no, of course. So I think for us, we do have quite a bit of white papers on these specific topics on our website. We work really hard to be advocates in the field for cybersecurity and really, really try to be, like I said, consultants in the field. So the reason, my why of why I work for Stanton House is everything is relationships, not transactional, really trying to just make a difference. And that's at the end of the day, all I want to do and all really my company wants to do. So if you are struggling with trying to figure out, you have it in the job search for 6 to 8 months, not sure where you're going from there, you can reach us at cybersecurity@stantonhouse.com. You can reach, my email is listed on our webpage. We're more than happy to help. Yep, and we'll have links of that in the show notes on both YouTube and our podcast site. So thank you so much. This was remarkable. So hope everybody enjoyed that. Sam Buckenmaier, thank you so much. Yeah. Stanton House, links to it. Check them out. They will be listed in the show notes, and we encourage everybody to reach out to them. It was fantastic. Great insight. Thank you both. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll see you. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
Well, that wraps this up. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hope you got value out of digging deeper behind the scenes of security and cybercrime today. Please don't forget to help keep this going by subscribing free to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, and download and enjoy all of our past episodes on Apple and Spotify podcasts so we can continue to bring you more of what matters. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for joining us.